Hello and welcome to Global Business Update. It's a super exciting day for Global Updates, and welcome to midweek, where we have been tracking the updates of the U.S. presidential election as it gets closer to the announcement of the next president of the United States of America. We have updates from our Fox Insight that tells that the President Donald Trump have clinched that position to become the 47th president of the United States of America. But other media platforms, they seem to be buffering. So we're going to be giving you some updates as the elections results come in and the official declaration happens. Some updates that happen, we see bank stocks advance overnight, trading as traders bet on less regulations in a Trump presidency. Also an election 2024 live results that poured in from early mornings into the early mornings. Trump wins Georgia, his second swing state winning. Republicans will win Senate majority, so the Republicans are running the Senate. Great news right there, to push out all those crazy laws that are against the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ in the United States of America. The result as it stands at the moment, President Trump is leading 267. This is officially, unofficially. And Harris is following strongly at 214. You can see that right on your screen. But Fox have already reported that the president has won the election, and we're waiting for the next of the media platforms and organization to follow suit. Let's move on to other updates, where U.S. 2024 elections set to become the most expensive in the history as a record high of $15.9 billion spent on the campaigns. If this is the amount spent, is worth it to save the lives of kids that are going to be turned into LGBTQI stuff. Is worth it to save the next generation. We'll continue to bring you all the latest global finance updates that are happening right now and dominating the airwaves at this moment. My name is Donal J. Here's our headline stories for today. Bitcoin and gold have further to go after U.S. election economic analysis. We see 27 U.S. states that are going broke and are struggling economically. That's why this election needs to be won by President Donald Trump to bring back that economic strength to those 27 struggling states in the United States of America. And Elon Musk and his tech allies, they come together and they want Donald Trump to win, which he already did. And markets set up for a very good rally into the year end. That is as a result of the U.S. election. The market is doing super great. We'll be reporting and shedding more light on the U.S. election results, trending global stories and events in a short while. But first, let's go on a quick break, and I will see you just now.
Take your work anywhere with King's Conference. Whether you're working from home, working in a coffee shop, or even on a beach or in the park, stay connected to all of your work meetings using King's Conference. Go to kingsconference.app and schedule your first meeting today.
Let's move over to the world markets. How is the world reacting to these stories? We're going to take some of the updates. In the American markets, we see European stocks head for lower open as global markets focus on U.S. vote count. And gold holds steady as market awaits U.S. election outcome. Dollar climbs as Trump makes early gains in exit polls. Also, Bitcoin rises. So all the markets are moving in favor, just waiting for President Donald Trump to be announced the next president of the United States of America. Europe markets, British regulator says $19.5 billion Vodafone, three major could go ahead if remedies are adopted. They also said U.S. elections in spotlight as polls are closing. And also, let's move over to the Asian market where they are being advised that amid the focus on the U.S. elections, they shouldn't take their eyes off the market. Also, the 10-year Treasury yield rises as traders see Trump having an edge in the election. Asia-Pacific markets mixed after Wall Street rallies ahead of U.S. election results. Let's move over to the African markets where we see some level of positivity as Kenya's private sector activity returns to growth in October as PMI shows that data right there. And South Africa's private sector growth also is sustained. So we're seeing positive results in the African market as the PMI data is being released. And Nigeria and Britain hail partnership to boost economic ties and security, such an historic relationship between Nigeria and its colonial masters, if I should use that word. Let's move over to our major stories for the day, where Bitcoin and gold have further to go after U.S. election. We're going to take an economic analysis right here with the presidential election in full swing, and already for early voters, investors hedge their bets for a former President Donald Trump win. And I'm sure they will be glad they did right now. This sent Bitcoin and gold higher. The Wealth Alliance president and managing director, Harold Dilton, thinks gold, probably Bitcoin as well, have further to go because we just don't have a plan as a country to deal with this $35 trillion in debt and growing. And we're listening to both candidates, and I haven't heard any talk about any kind of reduction in spending. That's what he said, while the presidents were also still campaigning into the early hours of the elections. There is no plan. That's what he said. So forget about the stock market. The smart money is in the bond market. Deaton says, noting that after the Federal Reserve announced a 50 basis point cut in September, the 10-year Treasury yield rose. That's telling you that the bond market, that's the smart money, that's institutional money, is concerned and is not buying in. So the portfolio manager also says that if Trump wins next week, domestic retailers will look good. So which president?
Bitcoin and gold slightly ticking to the upside here today as investors try to hedge election bets less than a week away from the presidential election. To discuss what sectors stand to benefit under each presidential administration, we want to bring in Eric Ditton. He is the Wealth Alliance president and managing director. Eric, it's great to have you here. So let's start with the Trump trade, because that certainly has been front and center, at least this re-excitement that we certainly have seen play out on Wall Street. I was just speaking to Matt Hogan over at Bitwise just about some of that excitement playing out within the crypto market. So let's look elsewhere. When you see the run-up that we've seen in gold and some of these other trades, does that have further to go?
I think gold, probably Bitcoin as well, have further to go because we just don't have a plan as a country to deal with this 35 trillion in debt and growing. And we're listening to both candidates, and I haven't heard any talk about any kind of reduction in spending. There is no plan. And forget about the stock market. The smart money is in the bond market. So here we had the Fed cut rates 50 basis points, and everyone said, great, here we go. And what happened? In the next month, the 10-year Treasury yield rose 50 basis points. And that's telling you that the bond market, that's the smart money, that's institutional money, is concerned. It's not buying in.
So, Eric, what is the top trade if Trump were to win next week? What's the top trade then for investors?
Well, it's not bonds.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that. But look, you've got to be pretty juiced up about the economy. Certainly domestic retailers, if we're talking about tariffs, domestic retailers look good. I think fossil fuels, traditional energy will breathe a little sigh of relief. Financials certainly look good. I think financials and utilities, honestly, stand to benefit under either candidate. And then, of course, the traditional gun stocks, prison stocks, et cetera. But definitely the more economically sensitive companies stand to benefit from things like corporate tax cuts.
You know, Eric, I'm
and
curious
stuff
to
like
get
that.
Eric, I'm curious to get your thoughts just on one candidate being better than the other for the stock market. We've talked to a number of strategists, and I think consensus is maybe Trump would be slightly better than Harris. Do you share that view, and why or why not?
Yeah, forgetting about political feelings. When you have a candidate that says, I want to bring down the corporate tax rate, I want to cut taxes, certainly that's music to the stock market's ears. That's just more corporate earnings. Now, there's a song called Watermelon Sugar High. And you can have that sugar high and the stock market can do great for a while. But if we're talking about another 7 trillion in debt at the end of 5 years or however long it's going to be, at some point, that's a problem. No one knows where the tipping point is. But at some point, the market is just going to say, the bond market, you've got to pay me a lot more yield to keep buying those bonds. And we just had a weak 2-year auction. So I'm not saying it's happening now. I don't think we're at the tipping point. Japan has 255% debt to GDP. We're at 125%. All I'm saying is the markets are looking and they can't see any plan to tackle this debt.
You know, Eric, there has been more and more talk about that. Yeah, it doesn't seem like, more broadly speaking, voters don't, it's nothing new there. Voters don't seem to obviously be prioritizing this. But even from a market's perspective, to some extent, some of that doomsday scenario hasn't certainly been priced in. At what point do you think it becomes a more serious issue then for Wall Street?
I don't think anyone knows the answer to that question, Shauna. We just don't know. It's not today. We're not there. But we know that we're spending more on servicing debt now than we are on defense at a time where we really need a lot of defense spending. So we're starting to crowd out investment. We're feeling that pain. It's another reason why the Fed really wants to cut rates. We'd like to bring those rates down and bring down that debt service. So I don't know that there's anyone out there that knows where the tipping point is. But, you know, we have a problem with the system. Who is going to vote for a candidate that says, listen, I'm cutting spending, you know, all those things you love, all those benefits, I'm cutting them and I'm going to raise taxes. That candidate has no chance of winning an election. And so right now it's marketing. It's who can give the voter the most. And we'll see if that actually happens after they get elected.
Yeah, certainly, and that's why we haven't heard really either of the candidates obviously talk about that, prioritize that within.
Just before we go to the next story, just an update on President Trump clinching the winner in the U.S. elections. Also, he's having a speech right now that we're going to bring later on in different programs that we have on the station. So stay tuned for viewers that are waiting to get all the details. You will get all business details on our program right now because the story is very, very fresh, not only on our station, but all across the world right now. This is a very fresh story. So we're going to be bringing developing stories all across our news bulletins. Please watch our news bulletins and also all our current affairs programs. But also on the Global Business Update, we're going to be bringing you all the updates and stories of his speech right now and other speeches he's going to be doing on Friday. So it's going to be a full election celebration and report of impacts on various economies of the world, China, Russia, the BRICS, Africa, Latin America, we spoke about the other day, and how everything is going to work together for us to have a beautiful economy at the end of this 2024 into 2025. Let's move into our next story where 27 U.S. states are going broke. This is one of the reasons why people voted out the Democratic Party. Economic analysis is that the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's suggestion that maybe states and cities should just go bankrupt amid the pandemic-induced economic crisis they're facing has not been particularly well received. A big part of the issue, as the law stands right now, states can't declare bankruptcy in the U.S. But the controversy points to a broader problem which states across the country are facing. Their costs have skyrocketed and their revenue has plummeted. And unlike the federal government, they can't run a deficit. So they've got to balance their budget so that they can take in what they put out. And right now, a lot of the states are sounding the alarm that they are going to need to make deep spending cuts unless the federal government steps in. And no states shouldn't be bankrupt, yes. They have to deal with their budgets and, need federal help to do so. So New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, for example, warned his state could need up to $500 million in cuts next year. Missouri Governor Mike Parson estimated he will have to cut $700 million and has already put a pause in $227 million in state funding. Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti has said he plans to follow thousands of city workers. You see, it's already affecting workers. States and cities are coming under enormous amount of financial pressure amid the pandemic crisis. And while the federal government has provided some relief, many leaders and lawmakers are calling for it to do more in follow-up legislation after the $2.2 trillion stimulus package signed into law in late March. And last week, McConnell offered an alternative to the support. Perhaps states should just declare bankruptcy. These are some of the issues that the incoming president of the United States have to deal with. Let's take a listen to this report.
After meeting our obligations, we have very little money left.
One count suggests that 27 states lack the necessary funds to pay their bills. The problem is most prominent in states like
Please, how many minutes is FCC giving us for that?
Not only City of Chicago, but State of Illinois is running straight into a brick wall in terms of its finances. City of Chicago is facing $1 billion deficit. State's facing a massive deficit while also needing to bail out things like the Chicago Transit Authority. Chicago Public Schools is asking for a bailout. The state cannot afford these things.
States received about $800 billion from the federal government to kick off the decade. That spending obscured long-running issues.
What we're seeing is largely a return to earth from those pandemic surpluses.
You know, we saw a big increase in income taxes. There was really like a bit of an economic boom.
States now are working with tighter budgets as the country's population and infrastructure ages. Even economically powerful states see trouble ahead.
To the degree that the states are relying on federal aid, it becomes a daisy chain of vulnerability.
State governments account for 15% of the nation's economic output, and they employ 13% of the U.S. workforce. So why are so many state governments going broke? And what can they do to repair their finances? State governments pay for much of the nation's systems of education, healthcare, transportation, and public housing, but they receive tremendous amounts of help from the federal government to do that. In 2022, federal grants covered 38% of total spending from state governments. That was a bit more than usual.
During the pandemic, we saw a lot of one-time revenue, a lot of one-time expenditures that kind of had the effect of obscuring these long-term challenges that states faced.
The ensuing economic boom strengthened state coffers and increased revenues. The increase in revenue helped state leaders lower taxes and increase spending.
We, you, all of us together, delivered both the largest tax cut ever by a huge margin and the largest increase in teacher salaries in our state's history.
We understand that that's, something that is politically palatable, particularly in the time of an election. It is something that if those receipts decline, we may see some future imbalances between, expenditures and revenues that states will have to correct.
Virtually every state made a tax cut. In some cases, this is a very intentional plan for states to spend down these unexpectedly high revenues. On the other side, this could really reflect tightening budget conditions and states needing to draw on those dollars to help make ends meet right now.
But the federal funds given to states will run out in 2026 as a cost of living crisis hits many parts of the country.
For too many, the cost of living is too high.
The higher cost of living is making some state leaders consider tax relief. That includes places like Wyoming and North Dakota.
States that do well are North Dakota, Idaho, South Dakota. And what these states really have in common is that they have a relatively limited fiscal footprint.
Many policymakers across the states, they did pretty well managing the pandemic era budget surpluses. A huge looming question out there is around the long-term affordability of the tax cuts and spending increases that were enacted.
State governments also have to manage long-running financial liabilities.
There are states like Illinois, Connecticut, and New Jersey. While these states really have accumulated a lot of debt after the great financial crisis, the main reason for their weak fiscal stance is the pension obligation.
Roughly 86% of public employees receive pensions. These are retirement plans that provide guaranteed income for life.
State and cities, in order to attract public servants, maybe paying them less money than they would make in the private sector, provide generous pensions, and they ended up getting behind.
If pension liabilities are fully accounted for, as many as 27 states lack the money needed to pay their bills.
Yes, the markets are set up for a very good rally into the end of the year, considering that President Donald Trump is now the 47th president of the United States. Election day is upon us and the market's mood is buoyant. Major stock indices rose on Tuesday following Monday's decline and some proxies of expectations of a Donald Trump victory, which has already happened. So Trump media shares rose, as did Bitcoin prices. Meanwhile, Treasuries sold off a touch, pushing yields higher. Whether Donald Trump or Kamala Harris wins the presidency isn't only the issue for investors. Investors have other concerns other than the winner of the presidency. Other questions include when the race will be decided, if the results will be contested, and whether the new president will end up working with a Democrat or a Republican-led House. But let me pause there. The Republican House is already led by the House of Senate is already led by the Republican. So that is already seated there. So you have a Republican voted in as the president and a Republican-led House Senate. So it's going to be a great time from the ending of 2024, 2025. I'm excited to see how all the news and all the updates are going to unfold. In recent market action, stocks gained, with tech-heavy Nasdaq Composite up more than 1%, leading gains among major indexes. Treasury yields edged higher. The 10-year yield traded near 4.3% after settling at 4.309%. The US dollar weakened further against the basket of currency, and Bitcoin prices continue to rise. A major cryptocurrency token called Dogecoin, a meme token often touched by Trump backer Elon Musk, rallied. It's doing so well right now. So we can see a comeback of cryptocurrencies, and also oil prices moved higher. Let's listen to this short report before we round off the program.
I think we talked about it during commercial break last week. One of the things that's happened in the polls is the view that there's a lot more women going to vote than before, but that these signals, whether it be Bitcoin or whether it be DJT stock or whether it be the betting markets, may also all be off, if this is true, on the assumption that actually there is a very small percentage of the people in the betting markets who are women, for example. There's a very small percentage of people who are women.
We will not be able to take a lot of that footage right now. We're going to keep some of it for you on Friday. It's going to be a fully packed program on Friday. So I'm going to quickly take some of the updates that happened from yesterday's election to the announcement of the 47th President of the United States of America, Donald Trump. Back stocks advanced in overnight trading as traders bet on less regulation in the Trump presidency election 2024. Live update: Trump won Georgia and his second swing state also. Republicans also clinched the spot as they win the majority in the Senate House. So the result as it stands at the moment, President Trump has won. But unofficially from our source. So we're going to be waiting for the next media houses to catch up while we lead the way. Thank you, dear viewers, for watching and staying tuned to today's episode of Global Business Update. I'm going to see you on Friday. It's going to be a loaded program, I promise you. So don't miss any part of it. See you next time, and God bless you.